Imagine spending decades building the perfect plan. You've manipulated an entire galaxy, fooled the Jedi,
controlled both sides of a war, and then out of nowhere a civilization you've never heard of arrives and immediately knows exactly who you are. That's the situation Palpatine finds himself in today. But here's the part that fascinated me. The Xianzhou Alliance isn't showing up to conquer the Clone Wars. They're showing up to hunt something. And once they start pulling on that thread, secrets begin unraveling so fast that the fate of Anakin Skywalker, the Jedi Order, and the entire Republic starts hanging by a thread. Let's get into it.
Death arrived over Coruscant on a Tuesday morning, wearing the shape of a warship older than the Republic itself. Not the metaphorical death that politicians spoke of in Senate chambers, the kind that came with economic collapse, or lost elections, or treaties signed in blood-red ink. Real death, the kind that had been hunting gods across 8,000 years of war and had just identified new prey. The Xianzhou Alliance tore through the fabric of reality at 0800 local time with the sound of a dimension screaming, a city-sized blade of ancient metal and immortal fury that made every force-sensitive in 1,000 light-years clutch their heads and taste copper. Space folded incorrectly around its hull. Stars bent their light away from it. The void itself seemed to recoil. On the surface, Palpatine was mid-sentence during a Senate speech about separatist atrocities when the Force, his oldest companion, his most reliable servant, the cosmic power he'd spent 80 years learning to strangle into submission, went completely, impossibly silent, replaced by something that felt like a blade held against the galaxy's throat. The transmission that followed was delivered in a language no protocol droid recognized, but every living being understood. Sith presence detected, corruption confirmed, extermination protocols authorized, evacuate the kill radius. You have 72 hours. Palpatine had been planning the Clone Wars for 13 years. He had accounted for Jedi, for separatists, for political opposition, for economic collapse, for every variable a Sith Lord could imagine. He had not accounted for warriors who had spent 8 millennia perfecting the art of killing things that refused to die, and they had just declared him their next target. If you have specific characters in another universe you will love to see enter into the Star Wars universe, tap the like button and drop the name in the comments below. More beautiful stories await. Jing Yuan had been expecting many things when the Xianzhou Alliance breached into this new universe. Hostile fleets, territorial governments, perhaps another abundance-cursed civilization that would require the standard diplomatic protocol of identify the immortality source, destroy it completely, leave before anyone asks uncomfortable questions about jurisdiction. What he had not expected was to arrive in the middle of someone else's war and immediately identify that war as theater. He stood on the bridge of the Luofu, 700 years of military command compressed into a posture that looked relaxed but wasn't, watching holographic displays translate this galaxy's political structure into something his tactical officers could parse. The Clone Wars, they called it. Republic versus separatists. Democracy versus corporate tyranny. Freedom versus oppression. All the usual rhetoric that people used when they wanted to avoid saying, we're fighting over who gets to own what. Except, General Fu Xian said from her position at the divination array, her third eye glowing with a particular intensity that meant she was reading probability streams across multiple potential futures simultaneously. The pattern is wrong. Define wrong, Jing Yuan said, though he'd been thinking the same thing for the past 6 minutes of analysis. Both sides of this conflict are moving in coordination, Fu Xian said, her voice carrying the flatness of someone reporting data that shouldn't be possible. Not tactical coordination. That would make sense if one side had infiltrated the other. Strategic coordination, as if both armies were being commanded by the same hand, executing a script where the outcome has already been determined. She paused, and the script ends with the extermination of every force-sensitive individual in this galaxy, except for 2, both of whom carry the specific energy signature of abundance corruption. Jing Yuan was quiet for a moment, running through 700 years of experience with wars that were not what they appear to be. Sith, he said finally. Yes, Fu Xian confirmed. The divination shows two. One visible, operating as a military commander for the Separatists. One hidden, embedded in the government structure of the Republic itself. Her third eye pulsed. The hidden one is the architect, and she paused, recalculating. He is sitting in their Senate chamber right now, in a position of governmental authority. How has no one noticed this? Jing Yuan asked, genuinely curious. They have noticed, Fu Xian replied. Multiple times. The divination shows dozens of individuals across this galaxy's history who have identified the pattern, gathered evidence, attempted to expose it. Another pause. They all died before they could act. Accidents, assassinations, mysterious disappearances. The architect has been removing observers for decades. Jing Yuan looked at the holographic display showing Coruscant, a city planet, impressive in its way, though the Xianzhou had seen 100 such worlds across 8,000 years of travel. Send the transmission, he said. Standard abundance threat protocol. Identify the corruption. Announce our intention to exterminate it. Give them 72 hours to evacuate civilians from the operational zone. General, his tactical officer said carefully, we are technically invaders in this scenario. We have no jurisdiction here. No diplomatic recognition. We just arrived and are threatening to kill a government official of a sovereign power. Jing Yuan looked at him. The Xianzhou Alliance, he said quietly, has fought the abundance for 8,000 years. We have watched civilizations fall to immortality corruption. We have seen entire species consumed by the promise of eternal life, transformed into monsters that spread suffering across galaxies. He paused. We did not develop our jurisdiction through diplomatic recognition. We developed it through being the only people willing to do what must be done when immortality decides to wear a crown. He turned back to the display. Send the transmission, he repeated, and prepare for hostile response. They will not surrender there, Sith Lord, quietly. The transmission went out at 0803 local time. By 0805, every government, military installation, and news network in the Republic had received it. By 0810, the Senate chamber had erupted into complete chaos. Anakin Skywalker was in the Jedi Temple training room, working through a lightsaber form with Ahsoka when the Force went silent. Not diminished, not clouded, silent. The way sound stopped when you were suddenly underwater, muffled and distant and wrong. He stumbled mid-strike, lightsaber deactivating automatically as his concentration broke, and Ahsoka caught him by the shoulder before he could fall. Master, what? Do you feel that? Anakin said. Feel what? Ahsoka looked around the training room, as if expecting to see something had changed visibly. I feel like something just left, like the temple suddenly got colder. Across the temple, every Jedi was experiencing the same thing. The Force, always present, always accessible, the constant background awareness that defined their entire lives, had become distant and quiet and replaced by something else. Something that felt like being watched by a predator. Yoda, in his meditation chambers, opened his eyes for the first time in 3 hours and made a sound that might have been concern or might have been recognition. Arrived, something has, he said to the empty room. Not dark, not light, other. His comm link activated before he could stand, Mace Windu's voice urgent in a way that Mace rarely allowed. Master Yoda, you need to come to the council chamber. Now. Something just appeared in orbit, and the Senate is calling emergency session. Feel it, I do, Yoda said, standing with the kind of speed that suggested the usual elderly Jedi Master routine was at least partly performance. Not alone, we are anymore. He made his way to the council chamber with the specific purposefulness of someone who had been alive for 900 years and had developed very good instincts about when something genuinely unprecedented was occurring. The council chamber was already full when he arrived, every master present or connected via hologram, and the central display showed something that made even Yoda pause. The Xianzhou Luofu hung in high orbit above Coruscant, and the hollow projection didn't do it justice. It was massive in a way that made Venator-class star destroyers look like escort craft. Not just large, ancient, The whole design was elegant in the way that things became elegant when they'd been refined across millennia of warfare. Every angle calculated, every surface serving multiple purposes. And it was broadcasting a message that was currently being translated by increasingly panicked protocol droids across the planet. Sith presence detected. The translation read in Basic, though the original language remained incomprehensible. Corruption confirmed. Extermination protocols authorized. Evacuate the kill radius. You have 72 hours. Sith presence. Mace Windu repeated, his voice carrying the specific quality of someone who'd just been told something they'd been suspecting for years and had been unable to prove. They detected Sith from orbit in less than 10 minutes after arriving. Detected what we could not, Yoda said quietly. Ow, Kit Fisto asked, though the question sounded more like wonder than skepticism. We've been searching for Sith for decades. The Council has been investigating every lead, every rumor, every whisper of dark side presence. And this ship arrives from, wherever it's from, and identifies a Sith presence in minutes. Because Obi-Wan said from his position near the window, looking up at the Luofu with the expression of someone working through a very uncomfortable realization. They're not looking for dark side force users. They're looking for something else. Something that the Sith also are, but which we've been too focused on force signatures to recognize. What? Mace said. Immortality corruption. Obi-Wan replied, turning to face the Council. Look at the language they used. Corruption confirmed. Extermination protocols. This isn't the vocabulary of people fighting a political or military threat. This is the vocabulary of people who have been fighting a plague. The Council was quiet for a moment, processing. You're saying the Sith are what? Diseased, Mace said. I'm saying, Obi-Wan replied carefully, that whoever is on that ship has been hunting something specific for long enough to develop standardized protocols for it. And they've identified that thing here. In our galaxy. In our government. Where? Kit Fisto demanded. Obi-Wan looked at the display showing Coruscant at the Senate building visible from the temple's height. Where do you think? He said quietly. Before anyone could respond, the temple's communication array lit up with an incoming transmission. Not to the Council specifically, to every Jedi, every single Force-sensitive individual in the temple, from Grand Master Yoda to the youngest initiate, received the same message simultaneously. It was very short. To the Force-sensitives of this galaxy, you are not our targets. The Sith are. Stand aside, or assist us, but do not interfere with extermination protocols. You have 70 hours and 53 minutes remaining. Anakin, still in the training room with Ahsoka, heard his comlink activate with the message and felt something shift in his understanding of how the galaxy worked. Someone had just arrived who wasn't afraid of the Sith. More than that, someone who considered Sith Lords to be routine enough threats that they had protocols for dealing with them. Snips, he said, I think we're about to see what happens when the Sith meet something older than they are. Ahsoka looked at her master, then up at the sky where the Luofu hung like a sword. Is it wrong that I'm kind of excited to watch? She said. Palpatine stood in his private chambers beneath the Senate building, surrounded by Sith artifacts that predated the Republic by millennia and calculated probabilities with the kind of cold precision that had kept him alive and undetected for 80 years. The Xianzhou Luofu was a problem, not an insurmountable problem. Nothing was insurmountable to someone who controlled both sides of galactic war and had been orchestrating political events for decades, but a problem that required immediate attention and careful management. They had detected him, somehow, through whatever means they used, and Force analysis suggested it wasn't the Force, which meant it was something he couldn't directly counter. They had identified his presence and declared their intention to kill him. 72 hours. It was, he admitted with the part of his mind that could appreciate such things, an elegant move. Not an immediate attack, which would have been crude and given him legitimate grounds to frame them as invaders. Not a prolonged siege, which would have allowed him to marshal the full military might of the Republican separatists against them. A timer, long enough to create panic, short enough that he couldn't ignore it. Interesting, he said to the empty room. His comlink activated. My lord, Dooku's voice came through, carrying the aristocratic calm that Dooku maintained even during crises. "I assume you're aware of our visitors." "Yes," Palpatine said. "They're claiming to hunt Sith," Dooku continued. "Should I be concerned that they announced this publicly before attempting to verify whether any Sith actually exist in this galaxy?" "They verified," Palpatine said, "before they transmitted. They know I'm here, Dooku. They know you're here. The question is how much they know beyond that." Silence on the other end of the line for 3 seconds. Then, quieter. "That should be impossible. The Jedi have been searching for a decade and found nothing." "The Jedi," Palpatine said, "have been searching for Sith. These warriors are searching for something else that Sith also happen to be. It's a different targeting system." He paused. "Which means our usual concealment methods may not work against them." "Recommendations?" Dooku asked, and Palpatine heard the slight shift in his apprentice's voice. The movement from confidence to the specific caution of someone who just realized they were fighting an unfamiliar threat. "Let them come to the surface," Palpatine said. "They've announced their presence. That means they're confident. Confidence is exploitable." He smiled, alone in his chamber surrounded by dark side artifacts. "And I want to see what warriors who claim to hunt gods for a living look like when they realize they're hunting the one god who's been hunting them back." The first shuttle from the Luofu touched down in the Senate District's diplomatic landing zone at 1,400 hours, exactly 6 hours after their initial transmission. The Republic had deployed clone troopers in defensive positions around the perimeter. Not hostile formations, but the specific staging that communicated, "We are prepared for things to become hostile at any moment." The Jedi had sent a diplomatic team. Obi-Wan Kenobi, Anakin Skywalker, and Ahsoka Tano. Not the most senior masters, but the ones whose temperaments made them least likely to do something unfortunate if the situation escalated. What emerged from the shuttle made Anakin's hand drift toward his lightsaber before he consciously stopped the movement. 5 figures. The one in front wore armor that looked like it had been forged in a time when metallurgy was an art form rather than a manufacturing process. White and gold and blue. Elegant in the way that swords were elegant, carrying the weight of something that had been worn in actual combat for longer than the Republic had existed. Jing Yuan stepped onto Coruscant and took approximately 4 seconds to catalog every weapon, every sight line, every tactical consideration within visual range. Behind him came Jingliu, her sword already at her hip in a way that suggested it had never not been there. Her eyes carrying the specific quality of someone who had been looking at the world through combat calculations for so long that it had become their default state. Then Yanqing, younger than the others by several centuries, moving with the particular confidence of a prodigy who had never lost a sword fight and wasn't planning to start. Fu Xian, her third eye closed but present, navigating the crowd with the precise movements of someone who could see probability and was steering herself along the path of least resistance. And Blade, at the rear, whose presence made every clone trooper's threat assessment shift unconsciously toward extremely dangerous for reasons they couldn't articulate but their hindbrain understood completely. Obi-Wan stepped forward, diplomatic instincts engaging, hands visible and empty. "Welcome to Coruscant," he said, pitching his voice to carry the specific tone of someone who wanted this to stay peaceful but was ready for it not to. "I'm Jedi Master Obi-Wan Kenobi. These are Jedi Knight Anakin Skywalker and his Padawan, Ahsoka Tano. We're here to. We know who you are," Jing Yuan interrupted, not rudely, but with the efficiency of someone who'd been alive long enough that small talk felt like a waste of time. "Jedi, Force sensitives, Guardians of the Galactic Republic. We reviewed your historical records during our approach." He paused. "You've been searching for Sith Lords for approximately 12 years, and have found nothing despite being physically present in the same building as one for most of that time." The statement landed like a physical blow. Anakin's hand did go to his lightsaber this time. "You're claiming there's a Sith Lord in the Senate?" he said, tension evident in his voice. "We are not claiming," Fu Xian said, her voice carrying the absolute certainty of someone who could see through time and had verified this across multiple probability streams. We are stating, the Sith Lord, the one orchestrating your war, the one who has been manipulating your government for decades, is currently in the Senate building. She paused, third eye opening and focusing on Anakin with disconcerting intensity. And you have met him multiple times. You think of him as a mentor. Anakin went very still. Senator Palpatine, he said, and it was not a question. Yes, Xian confirmed. That's impossible, Anakin said, but his voice carried less conviction than the word suggested. Chancellor Palpatine he's been fighting the Sith. He's been leading the Republic through this war. He orchestrated the war, Jing Yuan said. Both sides, every battle, every atrocity, every death. He looked at Anakin with the specific expression of someone who had seen this exact pattern in 100 different civilizations across 8,000 years. He is Darth Sidious. He has been Darth Sidious since before you were born. And he has been grooming you specifically to become his apprentice when the time comes to eliminate the Jedi. The landing zone was absolutely silent. Clone troopers in defensive positions, suddenly uncertain who they were supposed to be defending against. Jedi who had been searching for a Sith Lord for over a decade, being told by complete strangers from another dimension that they'd been standing next to one the entire time. And Anakin Skywalker, the Chosen One, processing the information that his trusted mentor might be the exact evil he was supposed to destroy. Prove it, he said finally. Jingliu moved, not aggressively, just a shift in stance that suddenly made every person in visual range aware that she was carrying a sword and knew how to use it in ways that went beyond anything they trained for. We are the Xianzhou Alliance, she said, her voice carrying the flatness of someone who had killed gods and found them disappointingly mortal. We have fought the abundance, the corruption that promises immortality and delivers only suffering, for 8,000 years. We have destroyed civilizations that embraced it. We have hunted its champions across galaxies. She paused. Your Sith Lords use similar techniques, extending life through corruption, manipulating others to serve their existence, spreading suffering to sustain their power. We know these patterns. We have seen them before. She looked at Anakin. And we know them when we see them in person, she said. Your Chancellor reeks of abundance corruption. He is saturated in it. The surprise is not that he is Sith. The surprise is that no one in your order noticed until we arrived. Obi-Wan, processing this, felt something click into place in his mind. Years of investigations, suspicious patterns, evidence that never quite materialized into proof. If what you're saying is true, he said carefully, then why announce your presence before acting? Why give him 72 hours to prepare defenses, gather allies, potentially flee? Jing Yuan looked at him with something that might have been respect. Because, the general said, we are not assassins. We are exterminators. When the Xianzhou Alliance eliminates an abundance threat, we do so publicly. We broadcast our intent. We give civilians time to evacuate. We explain what we are doing and why. He paused. Your Sith Lord has been hiding for decades, operating in shadows. Depending on secrecy, we're taking the shadows away. When we kill him, and we will kill him, everyone in this galaxy will see it. We'll understand what he was. We'll learn that immortality through corruption always ends the same way. He smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. We gave him 72 hours, he said, because we want him to see us coming. The IPC corporate survey vessel calculating interest emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Raxus system 48 hours after the Xianzhou had announced their presence to Coruscant, and the executive team aboard had exactly one priority: identify the most profitable way to exploit a dimensional rift before their competitors figured out existed. Topaz stood on the bridge reviewing preliminary market analysis with the specific focus of someone who had built a career on turning galactic instability into quarterly returns that made shareholders weep with joy. Market summary, she said to the analysis team. Galactic Republic, approximately 1.3 million member worlds, democratic government structure currently destabilized by separatist conflict. The lead analyst reported with the efficiency of someone who'd briefed executives on 100 conquests disguised as business opportunities. Opposition force calling itself the Confederacy of Independent Systems, approximately 20,000 systems. Corporate-backed military utilizing droid armies purchased on credit from multiple manufacturers. Credit terms. Topaz asked because credit terms were where the IPC made most of its actual profit. Predatory, the analyst said, pulling up financial data. 15 to 30% interest compounding monthly, collateralized against planetary resource rights, standard colonial extraction package. Topaz smiled. It was not a warm expression. So someone in this galaxy already understands how financial warfare works, she said. Excellent. That means they'll understand our proposal. Ma'am, the analyst continued, there's a complication. Another extra-dimensional force arrived 2 days ago. Xianzhou Alliance. They're currently threatening to assassinate someone in the Republic government and appear to be operating on moral principles rather than profit incentives. Moral principles, Topaz repeated, the way someone might say quaint historical curiosity. Yes, ma'am. They announced their presence publicly, gave civilians time to evacuate, and appear to be genuinely interested in, the analyst checked his notes, eliminating abundance corruption rather than acquiring territory or resources. Topaz was quiet for a moment, processing this through the specific financial calculus that the IPC had refined across centuries of dimensional market penetration. So we have idealists with significant military capability operating in the same theater where we're trying to establish credit relationships, she said. Threat assessment. They'll interfere with our standard debt trap protocols by offering moral alternatives, the analyst said. Governments we're trying to indebt will have the option of accepting Xianzhou military assistance without financial obligation, which significantly reduces our leverage. Then we don't compete with them directly, Topaz said, the solution forming with the practiced ease of someone who'd spent 15 years finding angles that competitors didn't see. We position ourselves as the practical option. Xianzhou offers military intervention with moral strings attached, judgment about your government, demands that you change your society, requirements that you meet their ethical standards. We offer credit, no judgment, no demands. Just capital and a very reasonable expectation that you'll pay it back eventually. She turned to the communication officer. Give me a meeting with the Separatist Council, she said. Tell them the Intergalactic Peace Corporation has a proposal regarding their droid production bottleneck. The Separatist Council met in a secured bunker on Raxus, and their mood could be accurately described as desperately trying to appear confident while being slowly crushed by the Republic's superior resources. Count Dooku presided with aristocratic calm, but Palpatine's instructions had been clear. Maintain the appearance of a competitive war while ensuring the Separatists remain dependent on Republic-scale threats to justify emergency powers. It was an exhausting performance. Then IPC representatives arrived offering unlimited military credit, and the performance became significantly more complicated. Topaz entered the council chamber flanked by 2 IPC security personnel whose augmentations made them look like they'd been designed by someone who'd read horror stories about debt collection and decided to make them literal. Gentlemen, she said, settling into a chair with the comfort of someone who'd negotiated with governments across 50 dimensions and found them depressingly similar. I understand you're currently fighting a war of independence against a republic that has approximately 60 times your industrial capacity. We are managing, what Tambor said in his mechanically filtered voice. You're losing, Topaz corrected pleasantly. Your droid production can't keep pace with Republic clone deployment. Your funding comes from corporate backers who are already nervous about return on investment. And you've just learned that an extra-dimensional military force has arrived in system specifically to eliminate Sith Lords, which I understand includes Count Dooku. The chamber went very quiet. Dooku looked at her with the expression of someone who'd been underestimated his entire life and had learned to recognize when someone genuinely wasn't underestimating him. You're well informed, he said. We're the IPC, Topaz replied. Information is what we purchase before we purchase anything else. She activated a holographic display showing financial projections. Here's what we're offering. Unlimited credit line for droid production. 0% interest for the first year. Delivery of manufacturing equipment, raw materials, and technical expertise to quadruple your current production capacity within 6 months. In exchange for, Newt Gunray asked suspiciously. Standard collateral package, Topaz said. Planetary resource extraction rights for 200 years across your member systems. Payable at the conclusion of hostilities, with flexible repayment terms based on your post-war economic capacity. She smiled. We're not interested in who wins this war, she said. We're interested in being the entity that finances reconstruction regardless of who wins. You need weapons now. We provide weapons now. You pay us back later. Everyone benefits. It was Dooku recognized with the specific horror of someone who understood political economy, a perfect trap. Accept the deal, and they'd win the war, but be economically enslaved to extra-dimensional corporate interests for 2 centuries. Refuse the deal, and they'd lose the war within a year. We'll need to review the terms, he said carefully. Of course, Topaz said. Take 12 hours. But I should mention, the Xianzhou Alliance has announced they're hunting Sith Lord specifically. That includes you, Count Dooku. Their timeline is aggressive. If you want to survive long enough to review contract terms, you'll need military capability to defend against warriors who have been killing immortals for 8,000 years. She paused. We can provide that capability. For a very reasonable interest rate. After she left, the Separatist Council erupted into argument. Dooku sat quietly, thinking. Palpatine had been playing a long game, engineering a war to justify emergency powers, positioning himself to crown himself emperor when the time was right, grooming Anakin as a replacement apprentice when Dooku had served his purpose. Now, 2 extra-dimensional forces had arrived and turned the game board into something unrecognizable. The Xianzhou wanted to kill him and Palpatine both, operating on what appeared to be genuine moral principles. The IPC wanted to debt-trap the entire Separatist Alliance, operating on profit principles that Dooku actually understood and respected more than Palpatine's mystical prophecy nonsense. And somewhere in the middle, the Jedi were presumably discovering that their Chancellor was a Sith Lord and having the specific kind of organizational crisis that destroyed religious orders. Interesting times, he murmured to the empty room after the others had left. His comlink activated. Palpatine's voice, carrying an edge of Sith fury, barely contained. You met with IPC representatives, his master said. I took a meeting with potential creditors, Dooku corrected. They offered better terms than the banking clan. They are extra-dimensional parasites attempting to colonize this galaxy through financial manipulation, Palpatine said. You will refuse their offer. Will I? Dooku said quietly. The silence on the other end of the line carried weight. You're questioning me, Palpatine said, and his voice had dropped into the register that preceded Force lightning. I'm asking, Dooku replied, choosing his words with aristocratic precision, whether your plan accounts for the Xianzhou Alliance specifically hunting Sith Lords, or whether we're adapting strategy in real time to account for variables you didn't predict. More silence. Then, do not accept IPC terms. I have a contingency. The connection cut. Dooku sat in the empty council chamber and made a decision that would have been unthinkable 48 hours ago. He activated an encrypted communication channel and transmitted a message to Xianzhou Luofu. This is Count Dooku. I understand you're hunting Sith Lords. I am one. I would like to discuss terms of my survival in exchange for information about the other Sith Lord you're hunting. The one who has been orchestrating this war from inside the Republic government. Meet me on Raxus. Come alone. Bring weapons if it makes you comfortable. I assure you I will. On Coruscant, the Jedi Temple had entered what Mace Windu privately thought of as controlled crisis mode. The specific organizational state where everyone was performing their duties correctly while simultaneously processing information that fundamentally challenged their understanding of reality. The council had been in continuous session for 16 hours. Obi-Wan had presented the Xianzhou's claims about Palpatine. Mace had presented 12 years of accumulated suspicious patterns that suddenly made sense if Palpatine was Darth Sidious. And Yoda had said 6 words that changed everything. Investigate the Chancellor, we must, which led to the current situation. Every Jedi who had investigative expertise was quietly, carefully, extremely discreetly examining every aspect of Palpatine's background, political rise, financial connections, and force presence. What they found was damning. Not because there was obvious evidence. Palpatine had been careful for decades, but because there was no evidence at all. No childhood records. No financial trail that extended further back than his emergence in Naboo politics. No Force signature despite being in proximity to Jedi for years. It was Obi-Wan explained to a private council session, the specific kind of nothing that indicated someone had been very carefully constructing a false identity. We need to confront him, Mace said. We need proof, Ki-Adi-Mundi countered. Accusing a sitting Supreme Chancellor of being a Sith Lord based on the word of extra-dimensional warriors and suspicious absence of evidence will destroy the Order's credibility. Our credibility, PLO, Kuhn said quietly, is already destroyed if the Xianzhou are correct, and we've been serving a Sith Lord for over a decade. The debate continued. While the council argued, Anakin Skywalker sat in a meditation chamber, trying to process the specific kind of betrayal that came from learning your mentor might be the evil you were supposed to destroy. He'd gone to Palpatine with everything. His fears about his mother, his relationship with Padme, his frustration with the council's restrictions. Every vulnerable moment shared with someone he'd thought of as a grandfather figure. And if the Xianzhou were right, Palpatine had been collecting those vulnerabilities like weapons. His comm link activated. Skywalker, an unfamiliar voice said. Female, carrying an accent he didn't recognize. This is Fu Xian of the Xianzhou Luofu. You have been assigned to my divination array for probability training. I don't remember agreeing to that, Anakin said. You didn't, Fu Xian replied. But the divination shows that in 70% of probability streams where you don't receive this training, you fall to Sith corruption within the next 6 months. In 90% of those streams, you kill your wife during the fall. I assumed you would prefer to avoid that outcome. Anakin was very still. What did you just say? He whispered. I said, Fu Xian replied with the patience of someone who explained probability outcomes to people in denial as part of her routine duties, that you are currently standing at a fulcrum point. Chancellor Palpatine has been engineering circumstances to push you toward dark side corruption. Your wife is pregnant. He plans to use your fear of her death to complete your fall. Pause. The future is not fixed. But without intervention, the probability that you become Darth Vader and serve him for 20 years is approximately 70%. Darth Vader, Anakin repeated. Yes, the name he has already chosen for you. The armor he has already commissioned. The surgical bay he has prepared for when you inevitably suffer catastrophic injury during your fall. Another pause. He has been very thorough, which is why we need to be equally thorough in disrupting his plans. How do you know all this? Anakin demanded. I can see probability, Fu Xian said simply. It's my job, and right now, probability says you need training in how to see it too. Report to Luofu's divination array in 1 hour. We have work to do. The connection cut. Anakin sat in the meditation chamber, hands shaking, trying to process information that his mind was refusing to accept while his gut knew was true. Padme was pregnant. He hadn't told anyone. She'd only told him 3 days ago. And Fu Xian knew, which meant she really could see probability. Which meant everything else she'd said about Palpatine, about Darth Vader, about the future he was heading toward, might also be true. He stood, walked to the temple hangar, and took a shuttle toward the Luofu, because apparently the only way to stop becoming a Sith Lord was to let extra-dimensional warriors teach him how to see the future. Weirdest Tuesday of my life, he muttered to himself. The Force, still muted and strange since the Xianzhou had arrived, didn't respond. Blade moved through Coruscant's underworld with the specific efficiency of someone who had infiltrated 1,000 cities across 1,000 worlds and found them depressingly similar in their predictability. Jing Yuan had given him simple instructions. Find out who created the clone army. Find out who's paying for it. Find out how the financial trail connects to Palpatine. The trail led to Kamino, to cloning facilities, to contracts signed by a Jedi Master who'd been dead for years, to accounts managed by the Office of the Supreme Chancellor. Blade downloaded the financial records, killed 3 Kaminoan security guards who tried to stop him with the specific efficiency of someone who couldn't be killed themselves and had stopped feeling guilty about the asymmetry, and transmitted everything back to the Luofu. Then he saw the clones themselves. Thousands of them. Millions of them. Beings bred specifically for war. Their aging accelerated, their thoughts conditioned, their entire existence designed around serving as weapons for a government that would discard them the moment they were no longer useful. Blade, who had died and resurrected thousands of times, who had been cursed with immortality he desperately wanted to escape, who understood what it meant to be a weapon shaped by forces beyond your control, stood in the cloning facility and felt something he hadn't felt in centuries. Kinship. These clones were like him, trapped in bodies designed by others, given purpose without choice, expected to fight and die and resurrect and fight again without ever asking whether the cause was worth it. "You are abundance cursed," he said to a group of clone cadets who were training in formation. Not the same curse, but the same result. You were made to serve someone else's war. The clone stared at him, not understanding. "I was once like you," Blade continued. "Given a body I didn't choose. Told I had a purpose. Sent to fight in a war that had been going for thousands of years before I was born." He paused. "I want you to know something. You're not weapons. You're people, and people can choose." He transmitted a second message to Jing Yuan. "The clones are sentient, fully aware, being used as slave soldiers. This is an abundance curse in a different form. We need to free them." Jing Yuan's response came back immediately. "Agreed. Add it to mission parameters. Eliminate Sith. Free clones. Return home." In that order. Blade almost smiled. Then alarms activated across Kamino, and he had to kill 17 more security personnel to reach his extraction point. It was, he reflected while regenerating from blaster fire that would have killed anyone else, exactly the kind of Tuesday he'd been having for the last 800 years. On the separatist world of Raxus, Jingliu walked through a spaceport filled with battle droids and corporate security forces, and not one of them challenged her, because something in their threat assessment protocols recognized that challenging her would be the last decision they made. Dooku was waiting in a private hangar, standing beside his solar sailor, hands visible and empty in the specific posture of someone who'd been trained in diplomacy long before he'd learned to kill people with lightning. "You came alone," he observed. "You asked me to," Jingliu replied, her hand resting on her sword hilt in a way that communicated alone doesn't mean vulnerable. "And you brought your sword. I always bring my sword. It would be rude to meet a Sith Lord without proper equipment." Dooku almost smiled at that. "You're not here to kill me immediately," he said. "You would have struck already if that was your intention. Which means you're curious about my offer." "I'm curious," Jingliu confirmed. "Why a Sith Lord would offer to betray his master. It suggests either desperation or genuine principle. I'm interested in determining which." "Both," Dooku said simply. "I fell to the dark side because I saw the Republic's corruption and believed only power could fix it. I became a Sith because Palpatine convinced me that the Jedi were too weak to do what was necessary." He paused. "I am now watching Palpatine orchestrate a war that will kill billions to crown himself emperor. And I am realizing that I was not trying to fix corruption. I was trying to replace it with my own version." "Regret is not the same as redemption," Jingliu said. "No," Dooku agreed. "But it's where redemption starts." He looked at her directly. "You have been fighting the abundance for 8,000 years. You know what immortality corruption does to beings who embrace it. I have been studying Sith techniques for extending life, draining others to sustain myself, spreading suffering to maintain power." Pause. "I'm exactly what you hunt, and I'm telling you that Palpatine is worse." "Why worse?" Jingliu asked. "Because I fell recently," Dooku said. 12 years ago. I still remember what it was like to serve the light. Palpatine has been Sith for 80 years. He has spent longer planning this war than I have been alive as a dark side user. He has contingencies within contingencies. He paused, and he has been grooming Anakin Skywalker, the Chosen One, to become his replacement apprentice. When he's done using me, Jingliu was quiet, processing this through 8,000 years of experience with how immortality corruption spread. "You want protection," she said finally. "You're offering intelligence about Palpatine in exchange for asylum from someone who can't be killed by Sith powers." "I want," Dooku said carefully, "to not become the monster I was trying to prevent. If that requires serving those who hunt monsters, so be it." Jingliu looked at him with eyes that had seen civilizations fall to the abundance, that had killed gods wearing mortal faces, that had spent 8 centuries learning to distinguish genuine remorse from manipulation. "Tell me about Palpatine," she said. "Everything. And I will decide whether you are worth saving or whether killing you is the more efficient option." Dooku began talking, and in a private office on Coruscant, Palpatine felt through the Force that his apprentice was betraying him and made a decision that would accelerate everything. "Order 66, he said to no one in particular. "I believe it's time." The order went out at 0347 Coruscant Standard Time, delivered simultaneously to every clone trooper in the Grand Army of the Republic through the biological command structure that had been embedded in their neural pathways since gestation. "Execute Order 66. On Felucia, Commander Bly raised his blaster toward Aayla Secura's back while she was deflecting incoming fire from Separatist droids, his finger tightening on the trigger with the smooth mechanical precision of someone whose higher cognitive functions had just been overridden by hardwired programming. On Kashyyyk, clone troopers turned toward Yoda with weapons raised, their faces showing the specific strain of soldiers fighting their own conditioning while their bodies executed commands they didn't want to follow. On Maijito, Kiadimundi's battalion opened fire without warning, without hesitation, without mercy. Across 1,000 worlds, the Jedi died, but not all of them. Blade had been standing 30 meters from Aayla Secura when her commander raised his weapon, and 800 years of combat instinct activated before his conscious mind processed what was happening. He moved, not with Force-enhanced speed. The Xianzhou didn't use the Force, didn't need to, had spent 8 millennia refining purely physical capabilities to the point where they could match Force users through technique alone. He simply crossed 30 meters in the time it took Bly to pull the trigger, positioned himself between the Jedi and the blaster fire, and took 17 shots to the torso that would have killed anyone who could actually die. His body jerked with each impact. Flesh tore, organs ruptured, blood that should have been fatal sprayed across the jungle floor. Then his abundance curse activated. The same immortality affliction the Xianzhou had been fighting for 8,000 years, now weaponized, now useful, and the wounds closed with the wet sound of tissue regenerating faster than damage could accumulate. Blade turned to face Commander Bly, blood still dripping from holes that were sealing themselves, and his voice carried the specific flatness of someone who had died 3,000 times and found resurrection more tedious than terrifying. "You are not in control," he said. "Something has overridden your will. I will not kill you for actions taken under compulsion." He moved again, faster than Bly could track, disarming the commander with a strike precise enough to break the blaster without breaking the hand holding it. The other clone troopers were still firing. Blade ignored them. 17 more shots. 23. 41. His body accumulated damage faster than it could heal, began to resemble something that had been through an industrial shredder, and kept moving anyway, because death was something that happened to other people and had stopped being relevant to him 800 years ago. "Run," he said to Aayla, his voice distorted by a throat that was currently regenerating from a blaster shot. "I will handle this." Aayla stared at him, at a being who was taking sustained military-grade blaster fire and treating it like rain, and made the combat decision that would save her life. She ran. Behind her, Blade systematically disarmed an entire clone battalion with the patient efficiency of someone who had all the time in the world because time had stopped being able to kill him. When it was done, when 40 clone troopers were sitting on the jungle floor without weapons and with the specific expressions of soldiers whose programming was fighting their actual desires, Blade sat down next to them. You were built to serve, he said quietly. Given programming you did not choose. Sent to kill people you did not hate. He paused. I understand. I've been a weapon too. For longer than you can imagine. Another pause. But weapons can choose to stop being weapons. When you are free of whatever controls you, remember that. He transmitted to Jing Yuan. Order 66 activated. Clones turning on Jedi across the galaxy. Felucia secure. 1 Jedi saved. 40 clones disarmed non letally. Awaiting further orders. Jing Yuan's response. Protect as many Jedi as possible. Lethal force against clones authorized only if non-lethal options exhausted. We are not here to kill slaves for following orders. Kashyyyk was burning. Not literally. The Wookiee homeworld was too wet to burn properly, but metaphorically in the way that civilizations burned when order collapsed and violence became the only language anyone spoke. Clone troopers had turned on Yoda with the sudden coordination that suggested centralized command, and the ancient Jedi Master had sensed the betrayal exactly 3 seconds before it manifested. Enough time to avoid the first volley, not enough to prevent the tactical situation from becoming catastrophic. He was 900 years old, still capable in combat, but no longer operating at the physical peak that had made him legendary 8 centuries ago. Fighting his way through an entire clone battalion would have been difficult even in his youth. At his current age, it was effectively impossible. Then Jingliu materialized from the tree line, moving with the specific speed of someone who had been a sword master for 800 years and had spent all of those years learning to move faster. The clones didn't see her approach. By the time they registered movement, she was already among them, her sword describing arcs through the air that seemed to exist in multiple places simultaneously, not through mystical duplication, simply through being swung by someone whose technique had been refined to the point where the boundary between possible and impossible had become negotiable. She disarmed 17 clone troopers in 4 seconds without killing any of them, her blade cutting through blaster barrels with the precision of someone who could calculate trajectory angles while moving at speeds that made thought and action indistinguishable. A clone commander tried to bring his weapon to bear. Jingliu's sword removed the weapon from his hands, then returned to its sheath. The entire motion a single fluid gesture that ended with her standing perfectly still as if she'd never moved at all. "You are programmed," she said, her voice carrying the specific coldness of the Xianzhou's Mara-struck warriors. The ones who had been touched by abundance corruption and survived it through pure discipline and had come out the other side angrier than anything that had ever tried to kill them. Biological compulsion. Override commands embedded in neural structure. She looked at the clones with eyes that had seen immortality corruption in 1,000 forms. I recognized the pattern. You're not enemies. You are victims. Yoda, standing behind her with lightsaber still ignited, looked at this warrior who had appeared from nowhere to save his life and asked the question that would define the next phase of this war. Know what controls them, do you? Yes, Jingliu said. The Sith Lord. Palpatine. He embedded command protocols in the clones when they were created. This is his contingency. When threatened, activate the army he controls and eliminate all Jedi simultaneously. She paused. It is elegant. For a being who relies on manipulation rather than actual combat capability. Many Jedi are dying, Yoda said quietly. Across the galaxy. Feel their deaths, I can. Yes, Jingliu confirmed. Most will die. We can only save those we reach in time. She looked at him directly. The Luofu is broadcasting override frequencies to disrupt the command structure. It will not stop all clones, but some will regain control. Those are the ones worth saving. She activated her comlink. Jing Yuan. Kashyyyk secure. 1 Jedi Elder saved. Requesting extraction coordinates for other Jedi under immediate threat. Jing Yuan's voice came back with tactical data scrolling across holographic displays. 17 Jedi currently within range of Xianzhou response teams. 43 beyond our operational radius. Prioritize those we can reach. Document those we cannot for post-operation analysis. It was Yoda realized with the specific horror of someone who'd spent 900 years believing in the Force's protection, the language of triage. The Xianzhou were treating Order 66 not as a catastrophe to prevent, but as an ongoing disaster to manage. Because they'd seen this before, on other worlds, in other forms. They knew how immortality corrupted tyrants operated, and they knew you couldn't save everyone. The Jedi Temple on Coruscant had become a battlefield. Anakin Skywalker stood at the entrance with the 501st Legion arrayed behind him, and his orders from Palpatine were clear: enter the temple. Execute all Jedi inside. Leave no survivors. This is the moment we have been preparing for. This is how you save Padme. The orders made perfect sense inside his head. Made the kind of crystal clear tactical sense that suggested they'd been planted there through months of careful manipulation by someone who understood exactly which psychological levers to pull. Padme was in danger. The Jedi were the danger. Eliminating the Jedi would save Padme. Therefore, eliminate the Jedi. The logic was flawless. The logic was also completely insane, which would have been obvious if Anakin had been thinking clearly. But he wasn't thinking clearly because Palpatine had spent 3 years making sure he wouldn't think clearly at moments like this. He raised his hand to signal the 501st forward, and Yanqing stepped out of the temple entrance, moving with the casual confidence of a 17-year-old sword prodigy who had never lost a duel and wasn't planning to start with someone whose fighting style he'd already analyzed during their previous encounter. Skywalker, Yanqing said, his voice carrying the specific cheerfulness of someone too young to have learned appropriate gravity for situations involving armies. General Jing Yuan asked me to intercept you here. Said you were about to make a choice you'd regret for approximately 20 years. Anakin's hand dropped to his lightsaber. Move, he said, his voice carrying the flatness of someone whose higher cognitive functions had been temporarily overridden by panic and manipulation. Can't do that, Yanqing replied. Those are younglings behind me. Children. You were ordered to kill children. He paused, head tilting with genuine curiosity. Quick question. Does that sound like something a hero would do? Because you've been telling everyone you're a hero. This seems inconsistent. The Jedi betrayed the Republic, Anakin said, repeating Palpatine's words with the mechanical precision of someone who'd been programmed. They're plotting to overthrow the Chancellor. This is necessary. The Chancellor, Yanqing said, his voice losing its cheerfulness and dropping into something colder, is the Sith Lord you've been looking for. The one who orchestrated this entire war. The one who's been grooming you to become his attack dog. He drew his sword in a motion so fast it appeared to teleport from sheath to guard position. And you're about to kill children for him. Do you understand how incredibly stupid that is? Anakin charged. The duel that followed lasted 11 seconds and consisted of Anakin attempting to overwhelm Yanqing with aggressive combinations that would have worked against most opponents, and Yanqing demonstrating that most opponents did not include sword prodigies trained by the Xianzhou's premier sword masters for their entire lives. Yanqing's blade moved with precision that made Anakin's technique look crude by comparison. Not because Anakin was unskilled, but because Yanqing had been training since age 7 under masters who had been perfecting swordsmanship for 800 years, and the difference between Jedi Knight with natural talent and Xianzhou prodigy with institutional knowledge was the difference between a talented amateur and a professional athlete. 3 strikes from Anakin, 3 parries from Yanqing that redirected force without opposing it, turning Anakin's momentum against him. 4th strike, Yanqing's counter, blade stopping 1 millimeter from Anakin's throat. You're outmatched, Yanqing said, which you should have realized before attacking someone who's been studying blade work longer than you've been alive. He held the position, sword steady. But that's not the important part. The important part is you were about to murder children because a politician told you to. Think about that. Behind them, Fu Xian emerged from the temple entrance with a group of younglings, her third eye open and glowing with a specific intensity that meant she was manipulating probability streams in real time. Anakin Skywalker, she said, her voice carrying the absolute certainty of someone who could see across time and had verified these facts in multiple futures. You are standing at the fulcrum. In 70% of probability streams, you proceed with this attack. You kill the younglings. You fall completely to the dark side. You become Darth Vader. You spend the next 20 years serving Palpatine. You kill your wife during your fall, not intentionally, but through forced choking during an argument after she learns what you've become. Your children grow up without knowing you. You die in agony, having accomplished nothing except spreading suffering. She paused. In 30% of probability streams, you stop. You listen. You realize you've been manipulated. You turn back. You save your wife. You meet your children. You live. Another pause. Which future do you want? Anakin stood frozen, lightsaber still ignited, looking at Yanqing's blade at his throat and Fu Xian's probability calculations and the younglings behind them who were watching him with the specific terror of children who'd been told they were about to die. Behind him, the 501st waited for orders. And inside Anakin's head, two voices fought. Palpatine's, whispering, "The Jedi are evil. This is necessary. This is how you save Padme." And his own, screaming, "You're about to murder children. Children, what the fuck are you doing?" He deactivated his lightsaber, dropped to his knees, and said 6 words that would save the galaxy. "I don't want to be Vader." Fu Xian's third eye pulsed, recalculating probability. "Good," she said, "because you just dropped from 70% likelihood of falling to 12%. Still work to do, but significantly better odds." She looked at the 501st. "Clones. You're programmed to execute Order 66. I am disrupting that programming now with neural override frequencies. This will be disorienting. Try not to shoot anyone while your brain reboots." She activated a device that emitted sounds at frequencies human ears couldn't register, but clone neural pathways absolutely could. Half the 501st dropped their weapons immediately, clutching their heads. The other half fought the override, torn between biological programming and the friendships they'd built with Jedi over 3 years of warfare. Commander Rex, his hand shaking as he tried to raise his blaster toward Anakin, managed to speak through gritted teeth. "General, can't control." "I know," Anakin said, standing slowly. "It's not your fault. You're being controlled." He looked at Fu Xian. "Can you save them?" Some Fu Xian said. "Not all. The programming is sophisticated, biological, embedded across multiple neural systems." She paused. "But those who want to resist have better odds." "Well, as a factor." Rex's hand lowered, weapon dropping. "Not shooting, my general," he forced out. "Not for anyone." Around him, clone troopers began dropping weapons, overriding their programming through sheer force of will combined with Fu Xian's neural disruption. Not all of them. Some clones maintained programming integrity, turned their weapons toward their brothers who'd broken free, created the specific nightmare scenario where soldiers fought themselves. Yanqing moved through the chaos with surgical precision, disarming clones on both sides without killing any of them, his sword describing arcs that removed weapons while leaving soldiers intact. When it was done, 63 clone troopers sat disarmed in the temple courtyard. 32 had regained control of their actions, and 31 were still fighting the programming. Anakin stood among them, looking at the men he'd almost led to commit genocide, and felt something break inside him. "Palpatine did this," he said quietly. "Yes," Fu Xian confirmed. "He was going to make me kill children." "Yes, and I almost did it." "Yes, but you chose not to." She looked at him with her third eye. "That choice matters more than the temptation. Remember this moment. When the dark side calls again, and it will, remember that you already chose once. You can choose again." Across the galaxy, the pattern repeated. On Cato Neimoidia, PLO, Kun survived because a Xianzhou operative had been shadowing him for 2 days and intercepted clone fire with personal shields that belonged to a technology base the clone's weapons couldn't penetrate. On Salakami, Stas Ali died because she was beyond operational range when Order 66 activated, her speeder exploding under clone fire before anyone could intervene. On Mygedo, Kautamundi fell because the Xianzhou had to make triage decisions, and he was simply too far from any response team. By the end of the first hour, the pattern was clear. Of approximately 10,000 Jedi serving across the galaxy, 3,000 died in the initial Order 66 activation. Of the remaining 7,000, approximately 1,000 were within range of Xianzhou intervention. The Xianzhou saved 547. The rest died while warriors who'd spent 8,000 years saving people arrived just minutes too late. Jing Yuan stood on the bridge of the Luofu, watching casualty reports scroll across tactical displays, and felt the specific weight of someone who'd spent 700 years learning that you couldn't save everyone, but never stopped feeling the failure of each person you couldn't reach. Casualty assessment, he said quietly. Approximately 6,500 Jedi dead, his tactical officer reported. 547 extracted to Luofu or secured in defensive positions. Unknown number in hiding. Clone army has fractured. Approximately 40% maintained Order 66 programming. 30% broke free through neural override. 30% uncertain status. And Palpatine, Jing Yuan asked, declared himself emperor 1 hour ago. Announced that the Jedi attempted a coup. Blamed us for harboring terrorists. Standard authoritarian consolidation pattern. Jing Yuan was quiet for a moment, processing 700 years of watching tyrants rise to power through manufactured crises. He accelerated his timeline, Jing Yuan said. We forced his hand. He executed Order 66 months ahead of schedule because he feared we would expose him first. Pause. Which means he is operating reactively now instead of according to his plan. That creates openings. What are our orders, General? The tactical officer asked. Jing Yuan looked at the holographic display showing Coruscant, at the Senate building where Palpatine was currently crowning himself emperor, at the galaxy that was sliding into dictatorship because a Sith Lord had spent 80 years preparing for this moment. Signal all Jedi we extracted, he said. Tell them they have sanctuary on Luofu for as long as they need it. Tell them we will continue hunting the Sith Lord who did this to them. He paused. And someone contact Count Dooku. Tell him his master just executed his contingency. Ask him if he still wants to help us kill the man who would have eventually killed him. In the newly proclaimed Imperial Palace, formerly the Senate building, now converted through emergency decree into the seat of absolute power, Palpatine stood alone in his private chambers and felt the Force settle into new configurations. Order 66 had succeeded. Mostly, the Jedi were destroyed. Mostly, his ascension to Emperor was complete. But the variables were wrong. 500 Jedi had survived through Xianzhou intervention. Enough to form a resistance, enough to train a new generation, enough to remain a threat. The clone army had fractured, with significant numbers breaking free of programming. Unplanned, unprecedented, unacceptable. And worst of all, Anakin Skywalker, his chosen apprentice, his replacement for Dooku, the chosen one who was supposed to cement his power, had been turned by extra-dimensional warriors who'd taught him to resist manipulation. Palpatine stood in his chambers, surrounded by Sith artifacts, and recalculated. This is not over, he said to the darkness. I have contingencies for my contingencies. The Xianzhou believe they've disrupted my plans. They have merely forced me to accelerate toward conclusions I was already moving toward. He activated a communication array hidden beneath the palace. Contingency Omega, he transmitted to facilities across the galaxy. Begin Death Star construction. Accelerate timeline by 6 years. I want planet-killing capability operational within 18 months. Pause. If they will not leave my galaxy peacefully, I will remove their platform from existence. Coruscant included if necessary. Another pause. The Sith have survived worse than this. We will survive them too. In orbit above, on the Luofu, Fu Xian's third, I suddenly opened wide. General, she said to Jing Yuan, the Emperor just initiated a new contingency. I see a weapon. Enormous. Planet-scale destruction capability. Her voice carried genuine alarm. He's building something that can destroy the Luofu. Jing Yuan looked at her. How long until operational? He asked. 18 months. Maybe less if he prioritizes it. Then, Jing Yuan said calmly, we have 18 months to kill him before he can use it. More than enough time. He looked out at Coruscant, at the planet that had just crowned its first emperor, at the civilization that was about to learn what happened when tyranny met warriors who'd spent 8,000 years killing tyrants. "Assemble the Jedi survivors," he said. "Tell them we're forming a coalition. Tell them we're taking Palpatine's empire away from him one system at a time. Pause. And tell them that the Xianzhou Alliance doesn't leave jobs half-finished." In a secured bunker on Raxus, Dooku received Jing Yuan's message and made a decision that would have been impossible 48 hours ago. He transmitted his response. "I accept your offer. The Separatist fleet will assist in eliminating Palpatine. On one condition: when this is over, you will kill me. I have been Sith too long. I do not trust myself to stop being what I became. But I can be useful before I die. Use me, then end me." Jingliu, standing next to him in the bunker, looked at him with something that might have been respect. "You understand what redemption requires," she said. "I understand," Dooku replied, "that I became a monster trying to fight monsters. The best I can hope for now is to be a useful monster before the end." "Then you will be useful," Jingliu said. "And when the time comes, I will give you an honorable death. It is more than most Sith Lords receive." "It is more," Dooku agreed, "than I deserve." The Empire deployed 400 Star Destroyers to Coruscant orbit over the course of 72 hours, and the formation they created was not a military blockade in the traditional sense. It was a cage. Palpatine stood on the bridge of the Super Star Destroyer Executor, rushed into service 6 years ahead of schedule because his timeline had been accelerated by extra-dimensional warriors who refused to understand that this galaxy belonged to him, and looked at the Xianzhou Alliance hanging in high orbit like a blade that wouldn't fall. "Range?" he asked. 20,000 kilometers, Admiral Tarkin reported with the clipped efficiency of someone who'd built a career on translating political violence in a mathematical precision. "Optimal firing range for concentrated bombardment. We have them surrounded, Supreme Majesty. They cannot escape without breaking through our formation." "Can they break through our formation?" Palpatine asked, though he already knew the answer through the Force. "Unknown," Tarkin admitted, and the admission clearly pained him. "Their defensive shields operate on principles our weapons weren't designed to counter. Turbolaser fire impacts at full strength, but dissipates against some kind of energy matrix that," he paused, consulting tactical data, "that appears to be converting kinetic energy into a different form and redistributing it across their hull structure. So we cannot destroy them," Palpatine said. "Not with sustained bombardment using conventional weapons. No, sir. And they cannot destroy us. They have engaged 17 of our Star Destroyers over the past 72 hours. Disabled 4. Destroyed none." Tarkin paused. "They're fighting defensively, protecting their position rather than attempting breakthrough, which suggests they cannot break through without sustaining unacceptable damage." Palpatine smiled, though the smile carried none of the grandfatherly warmth he'd deployed as Chancellor. This was the expression of a Sith Lord who'd spent 80 years engineering circumstances to serve his will and had just identified how to win a battle against an opponent he couldn't destroy directly. "Then we do not need to destroy them," he said. "We simply need to make their position untenable." "Admiral, what is the civilian population of Coruscant?" Tarkin consulted data with the specific hesitation of someone who just realized where this was going and didn't like it, but wouldn't voice objection because voicing objection to Emperor Palpatine was how careers ended. "Approximately 1 trillion sentients, Supreme Majesty." "And the Luofu's current position?" "High orbit, directly above the Senate District." Then broadcast this message to the Luofu on all frequencies, Palpatine said, his voice carrying the particular pleasure of someone deploying a strategy that was elegant specifically because it was monstrous. "They have 24 hours to surrender all Jedi refugees and depart this system. If they refuse, I will begin orbital bombardment of Coruscant itself. 1 district every hour until they comply." He paused. "Let us see if warriors who claim to fight for moral principles are willing to sacrifice 1 trillion civilians to protect 500 Jedi." On the Luofu, Jing Yuan received the transmission and felt something he hadn't felt in 700 years of military command. genuine surprise at an opponent's willingness to sacrifice their own population. He is threatening to bombard his own capital world, his tactical officer said, disbelief evident in his voice. That is not a rational military strategy. That is exactly what a Sith Lord would do. Jing Yuan finished quietly. He has spent 80 years consolidating power. The civilian population was always a resource to be expended if necessary. He looked at the holographic display showing Coruscant sprawled beneath them, a trillion lives rendered as mathematical abstractions on tactical screens. He is betting that we will not allow genocide. He is correct, but he is also assuming we will surrender. Will we? Fu Xian asked from her divination array. Though her third, I was already showing her the probability streams. No, Jing Yuan said, but we will need to be creative about how we refuse. He activated the communication array. This is General Jing Yuan of the Xianzhou Alliance to Emperor Palpatine. Your threat is acknowledged. Your strategy is recognized. And your assumption that we operate according to your ethical framework is incorrect. Pause. You threaten to bombard your own capital. We will prevent that bombardment, not by surrendering, by ensuring you cannot commit genocide without destroying the legitimacy of the government you just seized power to control. Another pause. We are broadcasting this conversation on all civilian channels across Coruscant. Every citizen of your empire is now aware that you threatened to kill them. Let us see how long your emergency powers last when 1 trillion people realize their emperor considers them expendable. He cut the transmission, looked at his officers. Evacuate as many civilians as possible, he said. Priority to children, elderly, those who cannot evacuate themselves. We have 24 hours. Make them count. The Jedi survivors, 547 of them, ranging from Grandmaster Yoda to Padawan learners who'd only been training for months before Order 66 shattered their world, gathered in the Luofu's main hangar bay with the specific exhaustion of people who'd been running for 3 days and had just learned they'd be running for considerably longer. Mace Windu stood before them, looking at the faces of an order that had numbered 10,000 a week ago and now fit comfortably in a single hangar, and chose his words with the careful precision of someone who understood that what he said next would define whether the Jedi survived as anything more than a historical footnote. The Emperor has threatened to bombard Coruscant unless we surrender, he said. General Jing Yuan has refused. He is currently evacuating civilians and preparing for a siege that will likely last months. Pause. We have a choice. We can leave, board ships, scatter across the galaxy, attempt to survive individually in a galaxy that has just been turned against us. Or we can stay, fight alongside the Xianzhou, help them break the siege, and eventually eliminate the Sith Lord who destroyed our order. The hangar was silent. Then Obi-Wan spoke, his voice carrying the weight of someone who'd spent 3 years watching the Republic fall into dictatorship and had finally accepted that diplomatic solutions were no longer available. If we leave, we abandon the Xianzhou who saved our lives. We abandon the civilians of Coruscant. We abandon any possibility of justice for the Jedi who died. He paused. I did not become a Jedi to abandon people when circumstances became difficult. I suspect most of you didn't either. The boy is right, Yoda said, and there was something different in his voice, an edge that suggested 900 years of institutional loyalty had finally fractured into something harder and less compromising. Failed we have, the Jedi Order. Failed to see the Sith. Failed to stop the war. Failed to save our own. He looked around the hangar. But failure is not the end. Failure is where learning begins. Stay we will. Fight we will. And when this is over, if we survive, build something better, we will. The vote was unanimous. 547 Jedi chose to stay. The evacuation began at hour 4 of Palpatine's ultimatum, and it was chaos organized through the specific competence of people who've been managing disasters for 8,000 years. Xianzhou shuttles descended to Coruscant's surface, carrying nothing but empty cargo space, and returned carrying civilians packed beyond safe capacity limits. Families, elderly, anyone who couldn't evacuate on their own and couldn't afford private transport off-world. The Empire tried to stop them. TIE fighters engaged Xianzhou shuttles. The shuttles, built to survive abundance corruption combat that made standard warfare look gentle, shrugged off TIE fighter fire and continued ferrying civilians while the fighters exploded against defensive systems that had been designed to counter threats significantly more dangerous than mass-produced Imperial interceptors. By hour 12, 200,000 civilians had been evacuated to orbital platforms and nearby systems. By hour 20, the number had reached 800,000. At hour 23, the Empire stopped trying to prevent evacuation and started trying to accelerate it. Not out of mercy, but because Palpatine had realized that civilians fleeing the capital while broadcasting stories about the Emperor threatening to kill them was destroying his political narrative faster than his propaganda machine could repair it. At hour 24, Palpatine's deadline passed. The Luofu did not surrender. The Empire did not bombard Coruscant. Because between Xianzhou evacuation efforts and Imperial facilitation of civilians fleeing what they'd been told was an imminent massacre, approximately 3 million people had left Coruscant in 24 hours, and every single one of them was telling the same story. The Emperor had threatened genocide. The Xianzhou had prevented it. And the Jedi, who everyone had been told were traitors, were helping evacuate civilians while the Empire tried to stop them. Palpatine stood on the bridge of the Executor and watched his political capital evaporate in real time as star systems that had supported his emergency powers began quietly questioning whether an emperor who threatened to kill his own citizens was preferable to the Republic's dysfunction. Change of strategy, he said to Tarkin. Maintain the blockade, but prepare for long-term siege. We cannot allow them to escape. Eventually, their resources will deplete. Their shields will fail. And when they do, we will destroy them and frame it as unfortunate but necessary military action against terrorists who are hiding among civilians. That could take months, Supreme Majesty, Tarkin said carefully. That takes months, Palpatine replied. I have been planning this for 80 years. I can be patient for a few more months. Count Dooku's solar sailor approached the Luofu under flag of truce on day 5 of the siege, and the conversation that followed would have been impossible 72 hours earlier. He stood in a conference room aboard the Xianzhou flagship, surrounded by Jedi who'd spent their entire lives being taught that he was the enemy, and spoke with the specific honesty of someone who decided that performance was no longer worth the effort. Palpatine has been my master for 12 years, he said. I know how he thinks. I know his contingencies. I know his long-term strategies because I helped design some of them. Pause. He is currently building a weapon capable of destroying planets. The Death Star. It was supposed to be completed in 20 years. He has accelerated the timeline to 18 months. The room went very quiet. A planet-destroying weapon, Mace Windu repeated, his voice carrying the specific flatness of someone who'd just been told something their mind refused to process. Yes, Dooku confirmed. The ultimate deterrent. The final argument. Join the Empire or be obliterated. He paused. He initiated construction the same day he declared himself Emperor, which means he was always planning to rule through terror rather than consent. And you helped him, Mace said, anger evident beneath Jedi calm. Yes, Dooku said simply. I convinced myself I was preventing greater evil. I was wrong. I became the greater evil. He looked at Mace directly. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I am offering intelligence and military assistance in exchange for being allowed to die fighting the monster I helped create. That is all. Jing Yuan, who'd been listening in silence, spoke for the first time. The Separatist fleet. Can you bring it to Coruscant? Not all of it, Dooku said. Many systems will refuse to follow a Sith Lord, even against the Empire. But approximately 40% will come. 200 capital ships. 500 support craft. Enough to break the blockade, if coordinated properly. And you understand, Jingliu said from her position near the window, that we will kill you when this is over, whether you help us or not. You are abundance corrupted. That is what we do. I understand, Dooku said. And I accept. I have been looking for an honorable death for 12 years. This is as close as I will get. Jing Yuan looked at Yoda. Master Yoda, you knew this man before he fell. Do you trust that he is sincere? Yoda studied Dooku for a long moment. 900 years of reading people applied to someone he'd known for 8 decades before the fall. Trust him, I do not, Yoda said finally. But believe he wants redemption through death, I do. Useful, that makes him. Pause. Use him we should. Watch him we must. And when this is over, kill him quickly, we will. Kinder than he deserves. More than Jedi usually offer Sith. Another pause. But these are not usual times. Then it's decided, Jing Yuan said. Count Dooku. You will coordinate separatist forces to break the Imperial blockade. We will provide tactical support and specialized strike teams. The objective is not to destroy the Empire. We lack resources for galactic conquest. The objective is to create enough chaos that Palpatine must divide his attention, allowing us to extract from the siege and reposition for a direct assault on his person. You want to assassinate the Emperor? Dooku said. We want to eliminate a Sith Lord. Jing Yuan corrected. Assassination implies stealth. We will be extremely loud about it. The Separatist fleet arrived 6 days later, and the battle that followed was not the glorious space combat that military historians would later describe. It was a brutal 3-way collision where everyone was trying to accomplish objectives that didn't involve actually winning. The Empire was trying to maintain the blockade while preventing the Separatists from reinforcing the Luofu. The Separatists were trying to break through to the Luofu while avoiding engagement with a full Imperial fleet because they were outnumbered 3-1. The Xianzhou was trying to create enough confusion that they could evacuate the Jedi and reposition without the Empire tracking their destination. It was chaos. Elegant, calculated chaos orchestrated by 700 years of Jing Yuan's tactical experience and 12 years of Dooku's knowledge of Palpatine's command structure. Separatist dreadnoughts engaged Imperial Star Destroyers at ranges where accuracy was poor but volume of fire was overwhelming. TIE fighters swarmed Separatist frigates, while Xianzhou point defense systems carved holes through fighter formations with precision that suggested significantly more advanced targeting computers than anything the Empire had encountered. In the middle of it all, the Luofu began moving. Not quickly. The ship was massive, maneuverable in a way that cities were maneuverable, which was to say barely, but steadily, using the Separatist assault as cover while repositioning toward a vector that would allow micro-jump to hyperspace. Palpatine, watching from the Executor, realized what was happening approximately 40 seconds before it was too late to prevent it. They're retreating, he said, disbelief evident in his voice because retreat was not something warriors who'd announced their intention to hunt him should be doing. Stop them. All ships, focus fire on the Luofu. Disable their hyperdrive before. The Luofu jumped. Not to a distant system. Micro-jump, barely 3 light years, just far enough to break the blockade while remaining close enough to Coruscant to remain an immediate threat. And then, from a new position, Jing Yuan transmitted one final message. Emperor Palpatine, we are the Xianzhou Alliance. We have spent 8,000 years learning to hunt beings like you. You believe you have won because you survived one engagement. You have not won. You have merely extended the hunt. Pause. We will return. Not in 20 years. Not in 10. Soon. And when we do, we will not besiege your capital. We will come for you directly. Prepare accordingly. The transmission cut. The Luofu vanished in a hyperspace with 547 Jedi, 3 Xianzhou elite warriors, and Count Dooku aboard. Leaving Palpatine standing on the bridge of his flagship, staring at empty space where his prey had been, and feeling something he hadn't felt since he was a young man, learning Sith techniques from Darth Plagueis. Uncertainty about whether he was hunter or hunted. On the Luofu, now in deep space and safe from immediate pursuit, Anakin Skywalker found Fu Xian in the divination chamber, her third eye open and tracking probability streams that spread across the future like branches. You told me I could choose differently, he said. Ishuz, I didn't become Vader. What happens now? Fu Xian looked at him with normal eyes, the third closing. Now you learn what you actually are, she said. Not the chosen one. Chosen implies destiny, and destiny is just probability weighted by circumstance. You are not chosen. You are capable. There is a difference. Capable of what? Anakin asked. Killing Palpatine, Fu Xian said simply. He has been manipulating you since childhood because he saw your potential and wanted to corrupt it. We saw the same potential and want to refine it. She paused. You are the most naturally force-sensitive being in this galaxy. That is simply genetics. What you do with that capability is choice. Another pause. Choose to become a weapon, and you will serve someone. Choose to become a person, and you will serve yourself and those you love. The Force doesn't care what you pick, but the people around you do. Anakin was quiet for a long moment. Padme is pregnant, he said finally, with twins. The visions I had of her dying were manufactured by Palpatine through Sith alchemy to push you toward dark side corruption. Fu Xian interrupted. He has been manipulating your dreams for months. The pregnancy is real. The death is not inevitable. It was only inevitable in futures where you fell and force-choked her during an argument after she learned what you'd become. Pause. You changed that future. She will survive childbirth. You will meet your children, but only if you continue choosing to be the person who refused to kill younglings rather than the weapon Palpatine wanted you to become. How do I do that? Anakin asked. By training, Fu Xian said. With me, with Jingliu, with the Jedi Masters who survived. By learning to see probability, to understand manipulation, to recognize when your emotions are being weaponized against you. She smiled, rare and genuine. And by remembering that being powerful does not mean being violent. Power is just capability. Violence is choice. You could be the most powerful Force user in the galaxy without hurting anyone who doesn't deserve it. Anakin looked at her, processing this through the specific lens of someone who'd spent his entire Jedi training being told to suppress emotion and had just been told to understand instead. I think, he said slowly, I'm going to like this version of training better than the Temple's version. Most people do, Fu Xian said. The Xianzhou learned thousands of years ago that suppressing capability makes it uncontrollable. Refining capability makes it useful. You are about to become very useful. In the Luofu's detention level, which was less detention and more guest quarters with guards, Count Dooku sat alone in a cell designed for beings significantly more dangerous than fallen Jedi, and waited for the death he'd been promised. Jingliu entered carrying her sword. Not yet, she said, seeing his expression, but soon, after Palpatine falls, after you've been useful. She paused. I came to ask you a question. Asked, Dooku said. Did you mean it? Jingliu asked. When you said you wanted redemption through death. Or is this another manipulation? Dooku looked at her, at a warrior who'd spent 800 years being the blade that ended immortal corruption, who'd killed hundreds of beings who'd thought themselves untouchable, who'd earned the right to doubt sincerity through experience. I meant it, he said quietly. I fell because I thought I could fix the galaxy through power. I learned that power only breaks things. Breaking is easy. He paused, searching for words. I want one thing I fix to stay fixed, even if the fixing requires my death. Especially if it requires my death. Because death would mean I finally stop trying to avoid consequences. Jingliu studied him. You are Sith, she said. Abundance corrupted, manipulative by training and temperament. I should not believe you. You shouldn't, Dooku agreed. But I do, Jingliu said, because I have been Mara-struck for 800 years. I know what it is like to be corrupted by power you didn't want and can't fully control. I know what it is like to spend every day fighting yourself. Pause. You are fighting yourself now. I recognize the battle. It is the only reason you are still alive. How long did you fight? Dooku asked. I still fight, Jingliu said. Every day, every hour. The Mara-struck never stop fighting. We simply learn to win more often than we lose. She looked at him directly. You will fight until you die. If you are lucky, the fighting makes you useful before the end. If you are unlucky, it simply makes you tired. Another pause. I will ensure you die useful. That is all I can offer. It is enough, Dooku said. Jingliu left, and Count Dooku sat in a cell aboard a Xianzhou warship, waiting for the battle where he would finally do something right by dying correctly. It was, he reflected, a better ending than he'd expected when he'd fallen 12 years ago. Palpatine stood alone in his imperial palace, surrounded by Sith artifacts and political power, and recalculated. The Xianzhou had escaped. The Jedi had survived. His apprentice had been turned. And his grand strategy, perfected over 80 years, executed flawlessly until extra-dimensional warriors arrived, had developed complications. Not failures. Complications. The Death Star, he said to the empty room. Accelerate construction by an additional 6 months. I want it operational in 1 year. He activated communication arrays buried beneath the palace. To all Imperial facilities, Xianzhou threats are to be treated as existential. Any research, any resource, any capability that could provide advantage in fighting extra-dimensional warriors, prioritize it above all other concerns. Pause. They believe they are hunting me. They will learn that Sith Lords do not die easily, and Emperors die even less so. He smiled, alone in darkness. Come back, he whispered to warriors who were light years away. Come back soon. I have been preparing to kill gods for 80 years. Let us see if 8,000 years of experience is enough to survive it. The Death Star became operational 14 months after the siege of Coruscant, 6 months ahead of the already accelerated timeline, because Palpatine had discovered that threatening to execute engineers' families was remarkably effective at improving productivity. It hung in the Horus system like a small moon built by something that had decided moons were insufficiently threatening and required weaponization. A battle station 120 kilometers in diameter, carrying enough firepower to sterilize a planet's surface, powered by a Kyber crystal the size of a city block that had been harvested from Jeddah by destroying the temple that had protected it for 10,000 years. Grand Moff Tarkin stood on the bridge reviewing final systems checks with the specific satisfaction of someone who had spent his entire career translating political violence into engineering problems and had just solved the biggest engineering problem of his life. Super laser operational? Palpatine asked via hologram from Coruscant, his voice carrying the anticipatory pleasure of someone about to deploy a weapon they'd been fantasizing about for decades. Fully operational, my lord, Tarkin confirmed. We can destroy a planet with a single shot. Targeting systems are calibrated. Power generation is stable. We are ready to demonstrate the station's capabilities. Excellent, Palpatine said. Then let us send a message to the Xianzhou Alliance. Target Alderaan. Broadcast the destruction across all channels. Let them see what happens to civilizations that harbor Jedi refugees or provide support to those who oppose the Empire. Alderaan hasn't harbored Jedi, Supreme Majesty, Tarkin pointed out carefully. Senator Bail Organa has maintained strict neutrality since the Empire's formation. Senator Organa, Palpatine corrected, has been funneling supplies to Jedi survivors for 14 months through channels he believes are secure. I have known about this for 13 of those months and allowed it to continue because I wanted the Jedi concentrated in locations where the Death Star could eliminate them efficiently. He smiled. Alderaan will serve as demonstration and military strike simultaneously. 2 purposes, 1 shot. Efficient. Tarkin, who had built a career on efficient violence, felt something twist in his gut that might have been conscience trying to wake up after decades of dormancy. That will kill 2 billion people, my lord. Yes, Palpatine agreed. It will. And when the Xianzhou see what I am willing to destroy to maintain power, they will understand that this galaxy belongs to me, not to warriors from other dimensions, not to Jedi who refuse to die. Me, on the Luofu, currently in deep space 3 sectors from Alderaan, Fuxian's third, I opened with the specific violence of a probability stream collapsing from possibility into certainty. General, she said, her voice carrying an edge that Jing Yuan had learned meant something catastrophic was shifting from might happen to is happening. Palpatine has activated a superweapon, targeting Alderaan. Planetary Destruction Capability. ETA to firing sequence. 47 minutes. The bridge went silent in the specific way that spaces went silent when everyone present was processing information too large to fit into their existing frameworks. A weapon that destroys planets, Jing Yuan repeated, his 700 years of military experience providing exactly zero context for this because the Xianzhou had spent 8,000 years fighting immortality corruption and had encountered civilizations that could sterilize biospheres, but never ones that could shatter planets themselves. Ow! Concentrated energy weapon. Kyber crystal amplification matrix. Power generation at scales that suggest they're drawing from hypermatter reactors. Fuxian's third eye pulsed, running calculations. The mechanism is less important than the timeline. 46 minutes. 2 billion people on Alderaan. We cannot evacuate them in time. Can we destroy the weapon? Jingliu asked, her hand already on her sword despite the fact that there was nothing in visual range to cut. Not in 46 minutes, Jing Yuan said, tactical mind already running through scenarios and discarding them as mathematically impossible. Even at maximum speed, we're 3 hours from the Horus system. We can witness the atrocity. We cannot prevent it. The bridge was silent again. Then Anakin spoke from his position near the tactical display, his voice carrying the specific flatness of someone who'd been training with Fuxian for 14 months and had learned to read probability streams himself and was currently seeing futures collapse into singularity. There's one option, he said. It requires me, and it requires every force sensitive on this ship working together. And it's probably impossible. He paused. But impossible is a probability calculation, not an absolute state. Fuxian looked at him, third eye focusing with sudden intensity. You're proposing a Force Nexus event, she said slowly. 500 Jedi channeling power through a single focal point. To create a telekinetic barrier large enough to intercept planetary-scale energy discharge. Pause. The mathematics suggest a 6% success probability, and approximately 90% chance you die in the attempt even if it works. 6% is better than 0, Anakin said, and I've already died in 70% of the futures where Palpatine won. I'm comfortable with those odds. Mace Windu, standing nearby, looked at Anakin with the expression of someone who'd spent 3 years watching the Chosen One be manipulated by a Sith Lord and was now watching that same person volunteer for certain death to save strangers. You've changed, Mace said quietly. I chose to change, Anakin corrected. Fuxian taught me that capability plus choice equals character. I'm choosing to be someone who saves people instead of someone who kills children because a politician told me to. He looked at Jing Yuan. General, I need authorization to attempt this. And I need every Jedi on this ship channeling Force energy into a meditation circle within 30 minutes. Jing Yuan looked at him. At a 21-year-old human who'd been trained by extra-dimensional warriors to see probability and had just calculated that his death was an acceptable price for a 6% chance to save 2 billion people. Authorized, Jing Yuan said. Assemble the Jedi. Attempt the impossible. We will position the Luofu to provide any support we can. And Skywalker, he paused, do not die. We have invested considerable training time in you. It would be inefficient to lose that investment. Anakin almost smiled. I'll try not to disappoint you, sir. The Jedi assembled in the Luofu's largest meditation chamber with the organized chaos of 500 people who'd been living on a warship for 14 months and had learned to move efficiently in confined spaces. Yoda stood at the center of the circle they'd formed, his 900 years of Force mastery making him the natural anchor for what was about to be attempted. Understand, you all do what Skywalker proposes, Yoda asked, looking around the circle of faces ranging from Jedi Masters who'd survived 100 battles to Padawans who'd barely completed basic training before Order 66 shattered their world. A Force barrier at planetary scale, Obi-Wan said from his position near Anakin, channeled through Anakin as focal point. Sustained for the duration of the Death Star's firing sequence. Pause. Master Yoda, this has never been attempted. The literature suggests it's theoretically possible, but practically lethal to whoever serves as focal point. Yes, Yoda confirmed. Kill Skywalker it will. Almost certainly. He looked at Anakin. Still wish to attempt this, do you? Yes, Anakin said without hesitation. Padme is on Alderaan. She's been coordinating refugee support from Senator Organa's estate. The twins, he paused, the knowledge that he was a father to 2-month-old children, making the mathematics of acceptable sacrifice very simple. They're with her. If Alderaan dies, my family dies. I'm not allowing that. Around the circle, 500 Jedi made the same calculation and reached the same conclusion. They would try. Then we begin, Yoda said. Channel the Force you will. Into Skywalker. Every Jedi here. Pull nothing back. And pray to whatever watches over foolish Jedi that 6% is enough. The meditation circle activated with the specific sensation of power flowing from multiple sources into a single channel. And Anakin felt like he was being filled with lightning that wasn't killing him only because Fu Xian had spent 14 months teaching him how to channel capability without being destroyed by it. 500 Jedi. 14 months of training under the Xianzhou's philosophy of refined capability rather than suppressed power. And one 21-year-old who'd been told he was the chosen one his entire life and was finally choosing to believe it meant something. He reached out with the Force, across 3 sectors of space, toward Alderaan, and began constructing a barrier that had no business existing. On the Death Star, Tarkin watched targeting systems lock on Alderaan with the grim satisfaction of someone executing orders they disagreed with, because disagreeing with Emperor Palpatine was how careers and lives ended simultaneously. Targeting locked, the weapons officer reported. Super laser charged to full capacity. Ready to fire on your command, Grand Moff. Tarkin looked at Alderaan through the viewport. A beautiful planet, blue and green, and utterly unaware that it had approximately 90 seconds of existence remaining. Fire when ready, he said, the words tasting like ash. The super laser activated. 8 tributary beams converged into a single coherent energy stream, carrying enough power to shatter planetary crust, boil oceans, and scatter atmosphere into space. The beam crossed the distance between the Death Star and Alderaan in 2.3 seconds, and encountered something that should not have existed. A barrier, translucent, shimmering, planetary scale, made of pure force energy channeled through 500 Jedi and focused by a single person who'd been training for this exact moment for 14 months without knowing it. The super laser impact against Anakin's force barrier created light visible from 3 star systems away. On Alderaan's surface, 2 billion people looked up and saw their sky turn white, then saw it fade, then saw the barrier hold. In the Death Star's observation room, Tarkin stared at sensor readings that made no sense. The planet is intact, the weapons officer reported, disbelief evident in his voice. The super laser fired at full power. The energy discharge was absorbed by, he paused, consulting data, by some kind of energy field that sensors cannot classify. It's not particle shields. It's not any known defensive technology. It's the Force, Tarkin said quietly, understanding hitting him like cold water. The Jedi, they're protecting the planet with the Force. He activated communication to Coruscant. Supreme Majesty, the Death Star has fired. The planet remains intact. Enemy Force users have created some kind of barrier, requesting instructions. Palpatine's response came back with the specific fury of a Sith Lord whose perfect weapon had just been countered by the exact enemies he designed it to eliminate. Fire again. Full power. Continuous discharge. No force barrier can withstand sustained planetary scale energy bombardment. Break them. On the Luofu, Anakin felt the second blast coming and understood with absolute clarity that 6% had just become 0%. The first shot had taken everything 500 Jedi could channel. The barrier had held, but barely, sustained by willpower and mathematics that shouldn't have worked, but did because the Force responded to need and desperation as much as it responded to training. A second shot would shatter the barrier, kill him, and destroy Alderaan. Unless, I need more. Anakin gasped, his body already showing signs of cellular breakdown from channeling more force energy than any single person was designed to contain. The second shot is coming. I can't hold alone. I need. Fu Xian's third eye opened with sudden realization. Not more Jedi, she said. More kinds of power. The Force is your power source. but you're trying to shape it alone. She looked at Jing Yuan. General, the Luofu's defensive shields. Can we extend them to planetary scale if we use the Jedi's force barrier as structural foundation? Jing Yuan's 700 years of tactical experience calculated the proposal in approximately 3 seconds. The shields are designed for ship-scale defense. Extending to planetary scale would require anchoring to something external. He paused, understanding, which the force barrier could provide. Technology and mysticism supporting each other. Ingenious. He activated ship-wide communication. All hands, divert all power to defensive shield emitters. We are attempting to extend our shields to Alderaan using the Jedi's force barrier as anchor point. This is not standard procedure. This is barely physics. Make it work anyway. The Luofu's shields activated, extended, reached across 3 sectors of space, and found Anakin's force barrier like a hand finding a rope in darkness. The second Death Star blast hit, and encountered not just force energy, but force energy reinforced by 8,000 years of Xianzhou defensive technology designed to survive abundance corruption combat. The barrier held. On Alderaan, 2 billion people watched their sky turn white for the second time, watched it fade for the second time, and began to understand that someone was protecting them. On the Death Star, Tarkin watched sensors register the second shot's failure and made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his very short life. "Cease fire," he ordered. "Sir," the weapons officer said, confusion evident. "Cease fire," Tarkin repeated. "The Death Star is designed to destroy planets. It is not designed to break force barriers reinforced by extra-dimensional technology. Continuing to fire will deplete our power reserves without achieving objective." He paused. "And I am not spending the Empire's premier superweapon on target practice that fails." He activated communication to Coruscant. "Supreme Majesty, I am recommending we cease assault on Alderaan and reposition to—" "You are recommending nothing." Palpatine's voice cut through, sharp with Sith fury. "You are obeying. Fire until the barrier breaks or the station's power is depleted. I will not allow the Jedi to make my superweapon look impotent." Tarkin looked at the communication display, at the Emperor's hologram, at the order to continue firing at a target they demonstrably could not destroy, and made a choice that defined character. "No," he said quietly. The bridge went absolutely silent. "What did you say?" Palpatine's voice carried the specific tone that preceded Force lightning through hollow projector and political execution. "I said no, my lord," Tarkin repeated, his voice steady despite knowing he'd just ended his career and probably his life. "The Death Star is a strategic weapon. You are ordering me to waste it on tactical theater. I refuse." The hologram flickered. Then Palpatine's full attention focused through the Force, and Tarkin felt pressure around his throat. Not physical, not something he could defend against, the specific sensation of being force-choked across 3 star systems by a Sith Lord whose patience had finally ended. "Then you are relieved of command," Palpatine said, his voice carrying absolute cold. "Permanently." Tarkin died, standing on the bridge of the Death Star, executed by remote strangulation for the crime of refusing to waste military resources on spite. His second in command, watching this, made rapid calculations about whether loyalty to the Empire was worth dying for. "Cease fire," the commander ordered. "All personnel, the Death Star is repositioning to Coruscant orbit for—" The bridge exploded, not from internal malfunction, from external attack. Blade had been clinging to the Death Star's exterior hull for 40 minutes, having infiltrated during the confusion of Alderaan assault, and had finally located what Fu Xian's intelligence had identified as the station's primary reactor access port. He cut through the hull with his sword. Not quickly. The Death Star's armor was substantial, but eventually, because he was functionally immortal and eventually was a timeline he could afford, and dropped into the reactor chamber carrying approximately 200 kilograms of Xianzhou explosives that had been designed to destroy abundance cursed structures and would work just fine on Imperial superweapons. He placed the charges with the precision of someone who'd sabotaged 1,000 facilities across 1,000 worlds. Set the timer for 30 seconds. and transmitted to Jing Yuan. Death Star reactor breached. Explosives planted. Station will be destroyed in 30 seconds. I will not survive the explosion. This is acceptable. Mission complete. Blade. Jing Yuan started to respond. Sir, Blade interrupted, and his voice carried something that might have been peace. I have been trying to die permanently for 800 years. Please do not deny me the satisfaction of dying for a purpose. The transmission cut. The explosives detonated. The Death Star's reactor underwent catastrophic failure as explosion propagated through systems designed to contain planet-destroying energy and discovered that containment worked both ways. Energy meant to destroy planets, redirected inward, destroyed the station containing it. The Death Star exploded with light visible from 100 star systems, taking with it Grand Moff Tarkin's second-in-command, 17,000 Imperial personnel, and one immortal Xianzhou warrior who had finally, after 800 years, found death. On the Lufu, Jing Yuan watched the explosion through long-range sensors and felt the specific weight of command, of sending soldiers to die, of accepting their sacrifice, of carrying the responsibility that others carry the cost. Blade is gone, he said to the bridge crew. He knew. He chose. Remember him accordingly. The bridge crew stood in silence for exactly 10 seconds. The Xianzhou's traditional acknowledgement of honored dead, then returned to their duties because grief was something you carried while continuing the mission, not something that stopped the mission. The Death Star is destroyed, Jing Yuan continued, his voice carrying tactical assessment rather than emotional response, because emotional response was something generals processed privately. Palpatine's superweapon is eliminated. Our timeline accelerates. Prepare for immediate assault on Coruscant. We are ending this today. Palpatine felt the Death Star's destruction through the Force and experienced something he hadn't felt since he'd killed his own master 60 years ago. The specific understanding that he might lose. Not could theoretically lose if many unlikely circumstances aligned. That was the background awareness that every intelligent being carried about their own mortality. This was different. This was the concrete realization that warriors who'd spent 8,000 years killing unkillable things had just destroyed his most powerful weapon, turned his apprentice against him, shattered his clone army, and were currently accelerating toward Coruscant with the specific intention of killing him personally. Interesting, he said to the empty throne room in his imperial palace. And the word carried genuine appreciation because he'd spent 80 years engineering circumstances to guarantee his victory, and extra-dimensional warriors had disrupted that guarantee in 14 months. He activated communication arrays to every Imperial facility across the galaxy. To all loyal Imperial forces, the Xianzhou are coming to Coruscant. They will attempt to eliminate me. This is acceptable. Coruscant is a trap. Pause. I have been a Sith Lord for 80 years. I have contingencies within contingencies within contingencies. When they arrive, they will discover what happens to beings who hunt Sith Lords on Sith-controlled territory. He deactivated the communication, stood alone in his throne room, surrounded by Sith artifacts that predated the Republic, and began channeling dark side energy with the specific focus of someone who'd spent decades preparing for a battle they'd always known was inevitable. Come, he whispered to warriors light years away. Come and try to kill the unkillable. Let us see if 8,000 years is enough. The Luofu emerged from hyperspace over Coruscant escorted by 200 separatist ships, 500 Jedi, channeling Force energy into defensive barriers, and Anakin Skywalker, who'd just survived channeling planetary-scale Force power and had discovered that surviving impossible things made subsequent impossible things feel achievable. The Imperial fleet was waiting. 600 star destroyers, commanded by officers who'd been told the Emperor was bait and their job was to destroy the Xianzhou regardless of collateral damage to the capital world. They're not running. Obi-Wan observed from the bridge. Palpatine is using himself as bait. Yes, Jing Yuan confirmed. He believes Coruscant is his territory and we are overconfident. He is wrong about overconfidence. We know exactly how dangerous he is, but correct that Coruscant is his territory. Pause, which is why we are not fighting the fleet. We are bypassing it. Ow! Mace Windu asked. Watch, Jing Yuan said. The Luofu activated systems that hadn't been used since arriving in this dimension. Dimensional anchor arrays designed to stabilize rifts between realities, now weaponized, now creating localized space-time distortions that ships designed for hyperspace travel had no framework for navigating. Space folded. The Luofu teleported. Not jumped, teleported, simply ceased existing at one point and began existing at another. From high orbit to Coruscant surface, materializing directly above the Imperial Palace with a specific violence of reality, deciding that conventional physics were negotiable. The Imperial fleet, calibrated to engage targets in orbital space, suddenly found themselves out of position to defend the capital. Phase 2, Jing Yuan said. Assault teams deploy. Objective: Emperor's throne room. Rules of engagement: lethal force authorized against anyone who actively opposes. Non-combatants are to be ignored. Sith Lords are to be eliminated with extreme prejudice. Jingliu, Yanqing, Anakin, Obi-Wan, Mace Windu, and Yoda dropped toward the Imperial Palace in assault shuttles reinforced beyond anything conventional warfare had designed. Count Dooku, in the final shuttle, activated his lightsaber and prepared for the redemption he'd been promised 14 months ago. Time to die correctly, he muttered to himself. The throne room of the Imperial Palace had been designed to intimidate. High ceilings, dark stone, Sith architecture that predated human civilization on Coruscant by millennia, all of it carefully staged to communicate that Emperor Palpatine was not merely powerful, but eternal. Palpatine sat on his throne surrounded by that architecture and by something more dangerous: years of preparation. The assault team breached the throne room doors with the efficient violence of people who'd been planning this assault for 14 months and cut through 6 royal guards before Palpatine even stood. "Welcome," he said, his voice carrying warmth that didn't reach his eyes. "I've been expecting you. All of you." He looked at the team. 2 Xianzhou warriors, 4 Jedi masters, 1 Padawan prodigy, and Count Dooku. "You believe you've come here to kill me. You have actually come here to discover that killing a Sith Lord in his seat of power is considerably more difficult than you anticipated." He raised his hands. Force lightning erupted. Not the targeted strikes he'd used against individual opponents for 80 years, but area effect discharge that filled the throne room with electricity sustained by decades of accumulated dark side power. The Jedi raised lightsabers and redirected lightning with varying degrees of success. Jingliu moved through the lightning with the specific indifference of someone who'd been struck by worse and survived. Yanqing's sword described arcs that cut through electrical discharge as if force lightning operated on physics that swordsmanship could counter, which it shouldn't. But the Xianzhou had spent 8,000 years learning to kill things that shouldn't be killable, and Sith lightning was just another impossibility to overcome. The battle became chaos. Palpatine against 8 opponents, and the Sith Lord was winning because this was his territory and he'd spent decades embedding Sith alchemy into the palace's structure and could draw on that power the way Jedi drew on Force nexuses. Mace engaged with Vapad, channeling Palpatine's own darkness back through his blade. Yoda matched Palpatine's Force attacks with 900 years of light side mastery. Obi-Wan provided perfect defense, his Sorisu protecting the team's flanks. Anakin, the Chosen One, trained by both Jedi and Xianzhou, no longer bound by institutional restrictions, unleashed Force capability that made the throne room shake. Jingliu's blade found openings that shouldn't exist. Yanqing's technique created vulnerabilities through pure precision. And Count Dooku, in the final moments of his life, chose to do one thing correctly. He tackled Palpatine, not with elegance, not with technique. Simply threw himself at his former master with the full knowledge that proximity to Palpatine meant death by lightning, and accepted that death as the price of creating an opening. "Master," Dooku said as Force lightning tore through him, "I believe I am finally done being your apprentice." He died holding Palpatine in place for exactly 3 seconds. 3 seconds was enough. Jingliu's sword took Palpatine's right hand. Anakin's Force strike broke his left arm. Mace's Vapad overwhelmed his lightning. Yoda's force push slammed him against his throne. And Yanqing, the 17-year-old prodigy who'd been trained by the Xianzhou to be perfect, drove his blade through the Emperor's heart with the surgical precision of someone ending a threat rather than executing a person. Palpatine died on his throne, yellow eyes wide with disbelief because he'd spent 80 years preparing for this, and it hadn't been enough. Because extra-dimensional warriors who'd been killing gods for 8,000 years had simply been better at killing than he'd been at staying alive. His last words were, "Impossible." No, Jing Yuan said from the throne room entrance, having watched the entire battle via remote feeds. Simply difficult. There's a difference. The throne room was silent except for the sound of Dooku's body cooling on the floor next to the Emperor he'd finally betrayed successfully. Jingliu stood over both corpses with her sword still drawn. "Two Sith Lords," she said. "Both dead. Both eliminated by those they underestimated." She looked at Dooku's body. "You died well. I will report this to the Xianzhou. They will record you as an enemy who chose redemption." Pause. It is more than most Sith receive. The Clone Wars ended not with a treaty but with a body count. One Emperor, one fallen Jedi who'd redeemed himself through death, approximately 7,000 Jedi dead, and one immortal Xianzhou warrior who'd finally found the permanent death he'd been seeking for 8 centuries. The Empire collapsed within 6 months as Star Systems realized they'd been serving a Sith Lord and withdrew their support faster than any government transition in recorded history. The Republic reformed under Bail Organa's leadership with significant constitutional amendments designed to prevent another Palpatine from seizing emergency powers. The Jedi Order rebuilt slowly, smaller and more cautious, led by Yoda and Mace Windu, but advised by Anakin Skywalker, who'd learned that power was a choice rather than a destiny. The Xianzhou Alliance departed through the same dimensional rift they'd arrived from. Their mission complete, their casualty count acceptable by 8,000-year standards. Jing Yuan stood on the bridge as they passed back into their own universe and received final transmission from Anakin. "Thank you for showing us we could choose differently. For teaching me I wasn't a weapon. For saving my family." Jing Yuan's response: "We did not save anyone. We provided capability. You provided choice. The combination saved your galaxy. Remember this distinction." The Luofu vanished into dimensional space. Behind them, a galaxy that had been hours from tyranny began the slow work of rebuilding under governments that now understood that democracy required vigilance, and that force-sensitive warriors who claimed to guard the peace needed to be held accountable to the people they served. On Naboo, Anakin Skywalker held his children, Luke and Leia, 3 months old, already showing signs of force sensitivity, and made a promise. "You will never be weapons. You will be people who happen to be powerful. There's a difference." Padme, standing beside him, smiled. "The Xianzhou taught you well." "They taught me," Anakin corrected, "that capability plus choice equals character. Everything else is just power looking for purpose." In the ruins of the Imperial Palace, Mace Windu and Yoda walked through throne rooms being converted into government offices and discussed the future of an order that had been shattered and rebuilt. "Different the Jedi must be," Yoda said. "The old ways led to blindness they did. Dogmatic we were. Sir, we were. Wrong we were. So what do we become?" Mace asked. "Guardians," Yoda replied. "Not soldiers. Not politicians. Guardians who serve the Force and the people. Who question authority. Who choose conscience over convenience." He paused. "Who remember that 8,000 years of wisdom from another dimension taught us what 900 years in this galaxy did not. That power without choice is tyranny, and choice without responsibility is chaos. Both we need. Balance we need. Balance," Mace repeated. The Xianzhou brought balance. Not the way the prophecy suggested. Not through the Chosen One destroying the Sith. Through warriors who taught the Chosen One he could choose not to become Sith in the first place. "Correct, you are," Yoda said. "Better prophecy, that is." They walked in silence through halls that had been designed to intimidate and were being redesigned to serve. And across the galaxy, 500 Jedi who'd survived impossible odds began training a new generation. Not to suppress emotion, but to understand it, not to serve institutions blindly, but to question them intelligently. Not to be weapons, but to be people who protected others. The Xianzhou Alliance had spent 14 months in the Clone Wars galaxy. They'd saved approximately 7 million lives through direct intervention and another 700 million through preventing the Empire's 20-year tyranny. They'd eliminated 2 Sith Lords, destroyed a planet-killing weapon, and taught the Chosen One that chosenness was a probability, not a destiny. They'd lost 1 warrior, Blade, who'd finally found death and left behind a legacy that suggested immortality's greatest curse was the inability to die for something worth dying for. They'd spent 14 months, changed a galaxy, and left, because that was what the Xianzhou did. They hunted corruption. They eliminated it. They moved on. Somewhere across dimensional barriers, the hunt continued. And in the Star Wars galaxy, people who'd been saved by warriors from another dimension began building a civilization that honored the lesson those warriors had taught. That power was a responsibility, choice was a privilege, and character was what you did with both when no one was forcing you to choose correctly.